Oh, I knew I forgot something. Okay, there we go. We're starting now with prayer. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for your world, for all the ways you bring diversity to our world, that you bring difference. We thank you for our connections with one another. We thank you for this opportunity to show your love for those who are arriving as new immigrants in this country. We pray for those who are waiting, for those in refugee camps, for those separated from family, for those who have recently arrived and are feeling overwhelmed and lost. We pray for all those who are heartbroken, those who've experienced trauma. Help us in this time to pay attention, to listen, to hear your spirit at work through the ways Samaritas serves and through the ways we might be able to help. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Beth, I am going to turn it over to you. And are you able to share your screen?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, maybe. Yeah.
Yep. Success.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys, and thank you for your time this evening. As I was saying, we are at Samaritas, we're talking to lots and lots of partners and potential partners, and it's really, I've worked there for about 2 years, and this has really been a really exciting time, not really like any other. So it's been great. So I'm Beth Burkholtz. I'm a pastor. I'm rostered in the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So we do have a covenant relationship with the PCUSA, and I was a pastor in churches, various churches in the Atlanta area and one in Livonia for the past 18 years or so before taking this call. And I had worked with refugees as a parish pastor for a long time. We didn't have too many official co-sponsorships, but I was involved with one in Atlanta with a family from Myanmar, and just really have been drawn to this work for a long time. So Samaritas is, oops, now I gotta go back. So Samaritas is the former Lutheran Social Services of Michigan. We're all over Michigan. I just kind of did a rundown of all the things that we do, including refugee resettlement. So we have all of these other branches. Family preservation is a newer branch that we're moving into, and that is helping kids to helping families to avoid foster care, basically. And that's a really interesting and great program to avoid trauma in children. Trauma treatment and trauma sensitivity is, it's always been at the heart of what we do, but now I feel like we have the language to talk about it. So especially with our refugee clients, we're really looking at how can we treat trauma? What's the best way for a family to come into a new place and have the least trauma possible, in addition to everything else that they have been through. So that kind of goes through all of our programs. We have a shelter for houseless families in Westland, and a shelter in Detroit for women who are coming out of incarceration and or human trafficking. So we also have senior living. If you've driven around, we have 5 of them. They're kind of like your typical senior livings. They are beautiful. I'm always like, I'm ready to move in. All my meals are provided. That would be awesome. We also have affordable living communities. We have 17 of those, and that doesn't include we have partnership with Habitat for Humanity in Hamtramck, which is an affordable living community specifically for newly arrived refugees. And we're hoping to do more of that in the years to come. We're hoping to have some more partnerships, to have some more, to build some more or renovate buildings, existing buildings, to have some more affordable housing, because that is a huge issue both for refugees and for generally everyone, and especially people that we serve. So Samaritas and before us, Lutheran Social Services has been welcoming people, welcoming refugees for 87 years this year. And it started with Germans who were other German Lutherans who were coming to America. And when that kind of wave of Germans had stopped, the legend goes that Samaritas asked, they kind of asked amongst themselves, you know, if they're not Lutheran, should we keep doing resettlement? And the legend is that they said, yes, we definitely should. We needed the help and people helped us. I don't honestly know if that's true, but I like it. So I will claim it because something happened, because we have been resettling people for 87 years from all nations. And really kind of the guiding verse, as Julie said, was for Jesus said, "For I was a stranger and you welcomed me." That is an actual picture of German refugees coming to America. And that's part of my family's story, is around the turn of the century that my grandfather came on a ship and he was 6 years old to Ellis Island. So I like to tell that story because it just shows that our America has all kinds of stories. And I think it's good to listen to all of them. So just a little bit of theology. You guys have probably studied this, but the Pentateuch uses the word GER. My Hebrew is terrible, so if anybody wants to jump in, I'm more of a Greek kind of pastor, but it uses this word over 50 times and has really specific examples on how to welcome the stranger with food and clothing and a place to stay. And of course, you know, that carries into from the Hebrew scriptures to the New Testament as well. So how does a refugee get to Michigan? The definition, the UN definition of a refugee is someone who cannot go back to their homeland for fear of bodily harm or death. And so I've gotten the question a lot, you know, what's the difference between a refugee and an immigrant? And that is a real valid question. They get kind of conflated together. You know, in the news or whatever, but a refugee is someone who must flee their country. An immigrant is someone who comes into another country, who crosses a border, usually by choice, and they are not necessarily fleeing from anything. When you hear about illegal immigrants, I'm putting that in quotes, crossing the border, some of them might meet the definition of a refugee. And that's where I think it gets a little confusing. But the thing to remember, you know, for me, that makes it easier is the UN definition of a refugee as someone who must leave their home. They sometimes go to a second country, a third country, maybe even a fourth country. This person in this picture is a teenage refugee. I use this with youth sometimes, and those are the things that he brought with him on a ship. Because we're talking about, like, what do you bring with you if you have 10 minutes to pack, or sometimes no time to pack. The very, very thoughtful people might pack, their documents. Some, anti-nausea pills are really big because of the journey across the sea usually. and water, sunscreen, all those kinds of things. And so that kind of puts it in perspective. What would you grab if you had 10 minutes to leave? So I have a video there, but I'm gonna skip it because we can do kind of questions at the end, and I'm assuming that you guys have some base knowledge about what a refugee is. So as we said, they are someone who is fleeing their home. Over half are children, people under 18. Half of all refugees are children, something like that. They are from, let's see, I think I skipped one. Right now, worldwide, Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan is in the top 3 countries of where refugees are coming from. South Sudan, and Myanmar. So with the exception of Venezuela, here in Southeast Michigan, we see people from all of these countries. I don't know if Adam has a different story, but we haven't seen many people from Venezuela. If any, they tend to go. He has? Oh, cool. Okay.
They all came to us.
They all came to Adam's house.
Cool.
Hey, Beth, can I just share too what I think? Can I share like refugee versus asylee?
Yeah, sure.
Asylum, just
Yeah.
so, because I
That'd be
think
helpful.
that has come up as I've heard people talk, and
Yeah.
so I want to give the example of our congregation, because we have 2 men from the Congo DRC. One came as a refugee and one got asylum. So one came here and didn't have the right, didn't have the paperwork, came under a visa that wasn't correct, right? And he declared that he wanted asylum from the US, and he was put in detention and then went before a judge, was granted asylum, and then was able to be released and to start his life here with asylum, with the status of an asylee, and bring his family over. The other man is a refugee, and his family fled the Congo and they went to Malawi, and his family is still in a refugee camp in Malawi, but he came through Samaritas as a refugee, which granted him a few more privileges and a few more resources than the other man who came as an asylee. And we can talk more about that in the question and answer time. But when we hear about people crossing the border and going into detention, those are people who are seeking asylum here in the US. The refugees come through a certain system, through the UN, are like vetted, and I know you're going to get into that, but I just wanted to make those 2 distinctions using the 2 men from our congregation, because I think that gets confused a lot.
Yes, thank you. That's super helpful, and I'll incorporate that in, because I think when some of us say immigrant, we're thinking asylee, like someone who crosses the border and then has to say like, well, I can't really go back. So that's a good distinction to make, when really immigrant is, someone who might drive over from Canada and want to live here because they have a job here. So those are the distinctions, but that's super helpful. So those are the worldwide countries. These are the kind of the top 5 countries where people settle. The United States is way down on the list, because in 2020, I think this is my next slide. Yeah, in 2020, the US only resettled 12,000 refugees. So people from, that have the UN definition of refugees, 12,000 people in the whole US, which is just like, that's just floors me. Because, population of Oakland County is 1.2 million, which I think that always puts it in perspective. And then 12,000, what, I think the news stories and everything else makes it seem like there's, billions or something like that. There are only 12,000 people. And that is a record low for refugees from, when the modern refugee program was established. That is definitely a record low. The countries that people came from, as Julie said, the DRC, we saw a lot of families from the DRC who had undergone really, really, really significant trauma. Samaritas resettled mostly single moms with multiple children from the DRC. And they, because they are single moms and they have a lot of children and they've been through a lot of trauma, it actually has been a good thing because we've been able to kind of walk alongside them for a little bit longer, because it is taking a little longer to kind of settle in and be treated for just everything that happened to them. So that's a perspective. In Michigan, we resettled about 200 refugees in 2020, but in 2021, we already, before the Afghan crisis, we had already expected to resettle about 4 times as many, so like maybe 800, an increase of about 500 individuals. So this is to put it in perspective why we really are in need of co-sponsoring congregations and organizations. We, are quadrupling the number of refugees that we are resettling, and then adding on about 220 Afghan refugees to that. So we're in the midst of hiring, lots of people. We've hired a couple interpreters who can speak Dari and Pashto, which are the main languages that the Afghan refugees will speak and do speak. And those people that speak Dari and Pashto, even in Southeast Michigan, are not on every corner. So it's taken a while to find them, but that is really important so that we can, support the families when they come in. I will, and I do want to say what we never know for sure, but most of kind of this first wave of Afghani people that are being resettled, most of them, at least one family member has very good English, or at least okay English, because they have been working for the Americans. And so I know that's a question that we get, how do we communicate? But that's a reality that most of them will have one family member who speaks pretty good English. But again, it depends on the family, and that's why we have interpreters to help out. So normally the refugee vetting process takes up to 2 years. 1 out of 100 refugees in camps will get to go to their country, like their chosen country, Germany, the US, wherever they want to go eventually. Others don't have the money or correct documents, or just simply don't know how and don't have the resources in camp to help them out. So 1 out of 100. The processes that our governing agency, LIRS, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, refers a family or an individual to Samaritas. LIRS also refers to Bethany Christian Services, to just multiple agencies all over the US. LSG, Lutheran Services of Georgia, which is who I worked with in Atlanta. So LIRS will refer, after they get people from the UN, LIRS refers them then to Samaritas. So Samaritas prepares, for their first 90 days. The refugees arrive by plane and begin their lives in Michigan. And so the first 90 days, and I'm going to get into co-sponsorship in a minute, but this is just kind of what it looks like. First 90 days, kids are enrolled in school. Parents look for jobs, they receive medical care, paperwork. If they need to apply for, a certain legal status, that's begun. And so the Afghan refugee program, which is not necessarily, it's the Afghan refugee program, and you might hear it called the Afghan parolees. I don't think anyone is crazy about that name. It's super misleading because they have, that's their status, is parolees. What that means is that they are, on paper, they look like refugees. They're going to be eligible for the same services, but they are in this different program because it was an emergency situation, to try to get as many people out as we could because they were fleeing for their lives. We know who they are. They have been vetted in as much as possible in the kind of lily pad sites, which are military bases. There's 3 or 4 of them all around the US, which is where they went first. They have been given basic medical care. They've been given vaccinations, including COVID. There was a little bit of a measles scare. And so they're given vaccinations for measles, for basically all the things in the camps. And some of them might be placed before, excuse me, before their 2 weeks are totally up, before they're totally immune, but they will be receiving the second shot. I know that's been a concern, but the Afghan refugees that are coming in are going to be receiving, sorry, I have a cold, not COVID, vaccinations. So, excuse me just a minute. I'm going to grab another cough drop. I'll be back. Julie or Adam, if you have anything to add.
Real quick.
Adam is going to share about legal stuff.
This is sort of the specialty of my organization, is the legal side of things. And we are privileged to count Samaritas as one of our really important partners. We'd love to work with them and help their clients. So of the 3 statuses, there are folks who are coming as traditional refugees. Fantastic. There are folks who are coming with a special immigrant visa status, which was an immigrant visa, a visa that was created specifically for people who've helped U.S. forces or organizations working in Afghanistan, and now we're in danger. This was a mechanism that was used before for Iraqis when we left Iraq. There are a bunch of people who are in a similar situation, and so there are a number of people who've gotten that visa. The humanitarian parolees are present in the country. I mean, they're vetted for safety. What they're not vetted for is the veracity of their asylum claim. So these folks are going to come and they're going to get a lot of the same services that that refugees are. They still need to apply for asylum in order to stay in the country permanently.
Okay,
Thank
you. Super helpful. All right. Yeah, so we at first thought that they were not going to be, that the Afghan parolees were not going to be eligible for the same services, but they are. That was the result of lobbying and legislation and all kinds of things. And so they're going to be eligible for Medicaid, for food stamps, for WIC, and that is really, really good news. And for the program at Samaritas, which is a program that refugees from 90 days, like if they've been in the country for 90 days and then up to 5 years, because we have one program that is arrival to 90 days. And then another one that's 90 days, usually more like 2 years, but it can be up to 5. So families are just beginning to arrive. Lansing had about 40 people arrive, like kind of all at the same time. So that's what we're kind of bracing for. We've gotten a couple of referrals. Like it says here, the average family size is 5.5. That's not necessarily like a mom, a dad, and 2 kids. That might be like a mom, a toddler, an uncle, a grandma, and like that is a family. And so, you know, if you consider yourself a family, that's great. So do we. And it does make for a little bit larger family size, but that is, you know, we want people to be safe and with their family. Apparently there's a lot of pregnant moms, which is what we are hearing from the camps. So we do have some agreements with some OBGYNs who have volunteered, like, I guess there's an association in Detroit who they've volunteered to treat our pregnant moms for free. An association in Dearborn of some Arabic speaking OBGYNs. So that's awesome. We also have another program in that's based in Lansing, Ann Arbor-ish, and that is for unaccompanied minors or unaccompanied refugee minors. And we are expecting a decent number of unaccompanied minors from Afghanistan. So that's not in the co-sponsorship program, but that is a program that needs, we definitely are in need of foster homes and mentors for those youth. So that's kind of a separate program, but that's definitely a need. And we are, those kids have plane tickets and are going to be arriving soon. So there's definitely we have resettled some unaccompanied kids from Afghanistan before. And so a couple of them who are graduates of the program are coming back to help and welcome. And that is really, that's really pretty cool. So you guys are here to say, what can you do? So I'm going to skip that part. Co-sponsorships. So what I'm going to do is I am going to switch, if I can, to the co-sponsorship document. I'm going to share that and talk through that, and then I will stop talking, and then we can do, then we can go on to the next part of our, there we go. Can you guys see this or no? Probably no. Okay, just a second. All right. So this is our, this is a co-sponsorship document. You may have seen this. It's just gives a little information. If you're sharing it with a, what's the Presbyterian Council vestry session?
Session.
Yeah. Session. Yay. I've been hanging out with Episcopalians and I want to say vestry now. So this is just, you know, a fact sheet if you're sharing it with your session, with congregation members. And we really do like to say, you know, 75% of the refugees Samaritas helps to resettle are self-sufficient. And, you know, that is not always a priority, especially if people are dealing with significant trauma. And that is something to, you know, to think about and be aware of. But most people who come, you know, want to go ahead and get to work and start their new life, and see what that looks like. So this is the faith and community group form. This is being a co-sponsor is a designation from LARS. It's an official designation. So it's not, if you have co-sponsored in the past, might have been a little looser arrangement. That was something that I experienced as well, like, or adopt a family. LARS has provided these guidelines so that co-sponsorship has kind of an official definition. And if a family is co-sponsored, some of the burden is taken off of the agency and also the government, providing all of that care. So it's really shared, which is a great thing. So this says, select 3 activities. Some congregations do more than this. Some congregations, pick 3, and that's what they can do. We have a group of people who are in like the Detroit chorus or something like that. And they are, they're not a congregation, but they're like, we want to co-sponsor a family. And so they're figuring out how they want to do that. So, these are suggestions, but really vitally important, like, picking up a family from the airport, making sure their apartment is set up, all of those things. So rental assistance, I wanted to highlight that because it says, make a financial contribution to the local agency to assist in paying for housing. So that is when we talk about $5,000 grant, that is something that it could be used for. Because Samaritas works with each family to help with budgeting, to help with, where does this money go, with banking, with all of those things. The rental assistance, it helps if it goes through us, and then we can say, okay, we can either pay a landlord directly, all of those kinds of things, work with the family. And so that, I know, that's probably the biggest financial commitment, and that varies based on the family size and where they live. So we said $5,000, that's a good round number that can be rental assistance. Could it be more than that? Sure. Could it be less than that? Also, yes. But that is kind of a ballpark to help support a family for a year. So this is just some prep in getting ready to welcome a family. Background checks, we have a website set up so that when your congregation decides, yes, we are going to co-sponsor, or even, yes, a group of us want to volunteer and mentor, you can go to our website and go ahead and sign up, and your background check takes about a week. Anyone who wants to drive a family needs to submit a driver's license and have that kind of additional layer of checking, just to keep everybody safe. Each co-sponsor group needs to have a point person, and we suggest committees. Churches love committees, to, if there are people who really are excited about providing a meal, that can be a team. If there's people who say, I don't have a lot of time, but I can I can drive, or I can shop, I can take the family shopping, that kind of thing. Just to have committees. There's some teachers or former teachers who want to help with schooling, things like that, just to have little groups, and the more organized, the better, of course. But I think it really helps when you're trying to support a family as things come up to have organization. So this is the fun stuff, but this is really important, when people are coming in from a new culture, from a new place, having, some trauma, language barriers. just to have some people to just to do events with. And if there are multiple congregations that are hosting families, that are co-sponsoring families, maybe you have a zoo day, or a pumpkin carving day, or something like that, where families can come together, congregations can come together, and just kind of enjoy each other's company. That's really fun. It's also, vitally important for mental health, for support. And so with that, I will, I'll turn it back over to Julie, and then we can carry on. And I'll take questions at the end, right?
Yeah, we'll do some questions. Beth, before you, maybe you can exit out of the screen so we can see each other, but
For sure.
I know that each person usually gets a set amount from the government that helps support their first few months here. Can you tell us what that number is, so that it's not just this $5,000 that's helping them with their first few months before they get jobs? There's money coming from the government per person. Is that correct?
Yeah, each person gets $1,175.
Okay, your sound got wacko.
Oh gosh, is that better?
No.
Sound like Darth Vader.
1,225 per person is what Sarah Martin Fanone said. Is that correct?
That's what Mihaela announced at a meeting today. So
okay, cool.
I've heard between 1,100 and 1,200. That's what I heard today.
Okay, so each person gets that amount coming as refugees. So again, like I was sharing, we had the asylee, and I don't want to get these confused, but we had the asylee in our congregation. They don't get any help from the government through the refugee program, which is what we're doing here. They would get $1,225 per person to help get them started again, before they get jobs.
And my understanding though, Julie, is that has to be spent in the first 90 days.
Right. Yeah.
So if they don't spend it, they don't get it. It's not like put aside for them.
Right. So we can kind of talk about that, or as we go, that $5,000, what I was imagining, that $5,000 might come in for when that amount finishes, and to help after those first 90 days. I want to introduce Sarah, and I want her to share the good, the bad, the ugly of doing this work. And because it can be beautiful, and it can be a struggle, and it can, it's great spiritual growth fodder for sure. And so I want to have Sarah just take a few minutes to share her experience.
Okay, thanks. So my church here in Fenton has been helping with resettlements for maybe 3 years. We had big plans when there was the Syrian refugee crisis, the beginning of that. And Samaritas had thought that they might start a satellite operation in Flint, and administrations changed and that didn't happen, but we stayed involved. So we basically function as a welcome team, and sort of what Beth was saying resonated with me, that it was sort of loosey-goosey at first, and we have now signed the co-sponsoring agreement like 3 years later. In the meantime, what we've done is our first person we helped was Rolly, who actually goes to Julie's church. And when he had an apartment, we found out what furniture he needed and delivered it to him. It's very simple. Then we called around to people who might be able to take Rolly on job interviews. And then when he needed to move, we drove down and packed all his things up into a trailer and moved his stuff to the next place. So I thought of it as you're sort of acting as that person's friends and family, because they don't have any friends and family in this country. So you're really just taking over and doing those things that a good neighbor would do. Since then, we have we're at a distance, so we mostly deliver furniture, and we're really excited that Samaritas is hopefully going to start resettling people in Genesee County. They're looking at 80 people here, which would be great. But our welcome team has, we have hosted two, one a family and one an individual. And he ended up staying here, and he lives in Grand Blanc now. If you're familiar, it's just north of Fenton. And so the way that worked is I was the point person or coordinator, and I really would suggest that every group, pick a coordinator. And that person, you're going to evaluate the needs of the refugee or the family. What is their level of education? And are there some gaps? The young man who stayed with us, his idea of where his education was different from what it actually was, and helping him to understand where he really was at and in the American system, and then connecting him with the appropriate resources. And some people are going to need a lot of those resources, and some people are going to be all set. So just the coordinator is going to find out where the person is at. And then you're going to have a list of volunteers, and I have a list of volunteers, so I know these are my volunteers who want to give rides. So, okay, those people have to register with Samaritas, and they have to get background checked. And then I have a group of volunteers, they just want to give money. That's what they want to do. And so I call on them when I have special needs, of things that just special needs, I guess there's not another word for it. Then I have, for example, I have a volunteer who's really good with cars. So when it was time for this young man to purchase a car, he accompanied him to all of the used car lots and helped him sort through. And that's not a skill that I have, but I was able to find someone to do that. As the coordinator, I didn't do a ton of the driving, but when he needed to, everyone needs to get their driver's license, so that you have to find someone to take them to Secretary of State. My neighbor taught him to parallel park. Things like this, you just sort of look at the needs and then find a volunteer to fit in all of those roles. Julie, I'm looking at my list.
Great.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The other big thing that I think that you're doing as your welcome team is you're showing the other members of your congregation what it means to be a refugee, because there is a lot of confusion and there can be a lot of negative thought. And so I know for my congregation, it's really been a learning moment. We're like, okay, well, yeah, these refugees, they're not coming in illegally to our country. They're not taking jobs or anything. Like, they're getting an idea of refugees as whole people. And I think that's really positive.
Thanks. I know from my own experiences, there's also challenges. Can you share briefly some of the challenges that you've encountered?
Sure. There's so many challenges, but I mean, definitely, I think that's where you really have to learn to set boundaries, because what your idea of what a person should do, it might be different from what the refugee or family, individual or family thinks that they want to do with their life. The young man who stayed here really wanted, he came in having been told by the UNICEF caseworkers in Indonesia that he was basically ready for American college. And I had to sort of break it to him that his math was at a 5th grade level. And that was really hard, and it didn't come easily. And I really think he thought he would be an architect by now, and he isn't able to be. So he had to go to high school. And those conversations were difficult, but we got through them. And then there are other more difficult things. A family stayed here, and I came home and there was a papaya cut all over the kitchen, and one of the knives is missing from the knife block, and I found it under a dining room chair. So talking about expectations and parenting differences, and those conversations were challenging, especially with using Google Translate. Some medical needs can be challenging. And then there's also just the challenging of feeling so frustrated sometimes with the small amount of care that refugees receive. Caseworkers at Samaritas tend to be really overloaded, and it can be easy for a volunteer to feel like their refugee, the family that they're connected with, isn't getting the attention that you think they deserve. And it's a good challenge to not get too hostile about that, and understand that they're one of a long list of people, and that everyone's needs are valid, and so that can be difficult. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah. I had the young man who lived at my house for a while, and he rode his bike to work, and I know that there was some judgment on me for not driving him, but I had to set my boundaries and made a decision at the beginning that I was going to get too frustrated if I had to pick him up at 11 o'clock at night. That was going to make me just so cranky. I couldn't do it. So I had to just be okay with, people like kind of looking, giving me some side eye, like, why aren't you driving this kid? And I'm like, well, I can't do all of those things. So you have to really know what you're able to do and try your best. And it isn't always perfect.
Yeah. I think I got a comment about not refugees don't often live with church members, and
Right.
most often are set up in their own housing.
Right. No, so
and-
this is I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Samaritas helps with that. So the expectations aren't that you are going to house a family coming in. Is that correct, Beth?
So
in your own house.
Sorry, and you're on mute. I found out
Yeah.
today they're going to have 30 days of paid housing.
Mhm.
My experience previously had been that like Salah, the man who stayed here, he was living in a hotel, burning through that $1,000 paying at the hotel. So
Mhm.
his caseworker moved him here temporarily to be able to save some of that money.
Yeah, and the good thing, one of the really interesting things about having so much publicity for the Afghani refugees is that we really have had a lot of offers of support like that. So we have temporary housing,
That's
which,
wonderful.
yeah, I was gonna say, you probably heard that today, and I heard that today as well.
Yeah, so that'll
that's
be
great.
different and interesting. And I tend to think that like a homestay is really helpful sometimes. And there was a woman with 2 sons who stayed here just for 2 weeks, and that was really nice because we could take her to Social Security and get her registered, show her what the grocery store looked like here, those kind of things.
So I think that what Sarah talked about too is setting boundaries, and that becomes just so important in terms of one, acknowledging what you are able to do and what you're not able to do, and the fact that at some point, the family's going to need to figure things out on their own, how to do things, and that's part of becoming a new American, is figuring out the system and figuring it out themselves. Refugees are some of the smartest people I know. They are all survivors. They have been through a lot, right? To get here, you have to have been through a lot and been through so many systems and know how to work the system a little bit. And so very capable people who are coming and who are able to be resettled. That has been my experience.
One thing I didn't mention, Julie, is a lot of times I think you're acting as an advocate for someone. So like if you're going to the Secretary of State with someone, it's not just dropping them off, but like showing them what is what line, and all these little cultural things that we take for granted. So the Secretary of State or making sure that when they go to the doctor, if there's an interpreter available, that you ask for that, because the person that you're bringing might not know where to go to ask for the interpreter, but you do. And I think that we're usually really good at asking questions and reading all the signs on the wall and just finding the best service and the best care for the people that we're with.
So I want to move into the application for the grant, and then we'll have some more questions, and I'm sure a lot of this will come up too as we go. But one of the hopes too is establishing a group within the Presbytery that is doing this work. And with the start of this grant program, if we are doing this work, then we know that we are not alone, and perhaps we can reach out to one another as a support for those who are also supporting families, to share ideas, to kind of hold one another accountable to keeping those boundaries as well, because that becomes really important. I'm going to go over the grant application really quick. Can you guys see that screen? Yeah, okay. So this is the Faith in Action Grant, track 1. I think the track 2 was what was sent out in the email. So no one received this apparently. An email is going to go out with all this information on hopefully Monday. It says that funds from the track, so the $5,000, 10 $5,000 grants will be available. That $5,000 is to go to help the family directly. So it'll go to your church, and then with you, the family, and Samaritas, the caseworker, and primarily the family, right? Because they're the ones with the autonomy, it's their lives. They will help decide how this money is spent, to help them succeed. So the grant application is due January 31st. And so the funds won't be available until hopefully by the end of February. We'd have those announced and available. So I'm not sure, Beth, that might be a question you can answer about, that might not include the Afghani group, but we have all those others who are coming as well. Congregations from the Presbytery of Detroit are able to apply. These are the questions. I'm just going to go over them briefly. How does this project, we tried to keep this pretty basic. We don't want a book report back with the grant application, but just for you to reflect and to think and to get some of the things set up and thought out. How does this project fit into the mission vision of your church? Did you attend the Zoom or did you watch the recording? You all check yes. What questions and concerns do you still have? What other resources is your church committing to this effort? Are there people with different skill sets? Are you thinking about in-kind donations such as furniture? Are you able to offer some more financial support? Or maybe you're not sure. So that would be that question. We want you just list the names of those on the core team for the project. We don't want you to just say, we have team members. We want some names so that there's some accountability. What anti-racism or cross-cultural education has your church or core team members engaged in the past few years? If you haven't, that's okay. As we train, we'll be talking a little bit about that, but that is helpful. I know working with the families that I've worked with in the past, there have been times where I have to take a break and say, wait a minute, this is not feeling right. What is going on inside of me? What are the different cultural barriers that are happening or cross-cultural interactions that are not connecting for us? And being able to recognize that and to take a step back is really important in these relationships. And then just agreeing to the funds and helping Samaritas with their reporting as well. So we want to make sure that your session has approved of it and the signatures are there. So that will be sent out in the email next week. Okay. What are the questions we have? I'm hoping there's some good questions. You're free, you can write them in the chat and we can all see them there. Or if you are unable to do that, you can just raise your hand or we can have a conversation.
I saw one earlier that says, is it possible that we could be paired with a family who might eventually be sent back or not receive asylum? And I'm assuming that you meant the Afghan parolees. I'm glad Adam is sort of like adjunct on the Zoom because I don't know the answer to that question. I think the legal ramifications of having this many, like this great a number of refugees come at the same time. I have heard talk of like a sweeping legislation that will grant all of them asylum. I don't know if that will happen, but I have heard, talk of that, because if that doesn't happen, then the courts are going to be tied up for years and years and years and years with Afghan people seeking asylum. So that's a long answer, but the short answer is I don't know. And after the past few years, I'm sure anything could happen, but it seems unlikely with this great of a number of people.
Beth, there's a comment from Emma, or a question from Emma about the next level of training before we are given the names of a family and set to go. Like, what are the next steps and confirming that we'd be paired with a single family to work with for a period of time, and maybe perhaps what that period of time or expectation is.
Sure. So the next level of training is signing up for background checks and including driver's checks. And then there is a series of trainings, and my colleagues in New Americans, Sarah may know some of them. We have a couple new colleagues that are working specifically with Afghan refugees, Ashley Johnson, Talisha Belk. We're going to have some more colleagues come in. So they're going to be running trainings over Zoom for people that will be working with refugees. There's also
something called mentorship basics that Loretta Harbison and I we can give that to anybody over. She and I can do that, just a volunteer led training after you
Cool.
sign up on Galaxy. That's probably, like Beth said, that's an important step.
Yeah. And when you do sign up on it's Galaxy Digital, when you do sign up on that, just make sure you have your organization, your church, listed there, so that we know that you're part of a co-sponsorship group, because there's a lot going on. So just make absolutely sure that you have the name of your church. And there are things like mentorship basics. There is child safety, human trafficking. Like there's some pretty serious videos there, but they're keeping everyone safe. And so I see down here, and this is, I'll go back to how is a family assigned. The trainings will teach volunteers about the culture and history of the refugees. Yes, but there are some options that we're becoming aware of. The Arab Council in Detroit led a training for Samaritas staff, for a few other people in the community about Afghan culture, about Afghan Muslim culture. And that was really, really helpful. So we can definitely just make some of those things happen as well. But as far as, basics like food, which that's really important if you're stocking a pantry, we provide that training. And
That's
then,
also,
yeah.
Sorry,
I
was going to say, that's also a great kind of preparation thing that you can get your whole congregation involved in too. I know some churches in the past have done, we're going to learn more about this part of the world in preparation for welcoming the family. And that can be incorporated into worship or a moment for mission or something, or a newsletter article or things like that as well. And it can be a way to educate the congregation about a certain part of the world that the family's coming from.
For sure. And and I don't think I'm saying their name right, but the Arab Council of Detroit. Anyway, they were so great, super, super helpful. And as we add more staff, we have, like I said, graduates of our youth program who are Afghani, and are so excited to tell people about Afghanistan, and to have new people come. They are really excited to have new neighbors, which is pretty cool.
Sarah, U of M is right now offering a teach out on Afghan refugees, and I'm going to read the title. It's
cool.
And it's Afghan refugees and displaced people teach out, and that's something that anyone can take. It's a free online course, and I can put the link in the chat if I can.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.
Beth, can you go over Matt's question from how is a family assigned to a church?
Yeah.
And that the grant receiving the grant again, we will not be letting folks know that they're receiving the grant until the end of February 2022. So that's why I was saying, considering the timing, it
Mhm.
sounds like the Afghani refugees are coming quicker than that. But there are, you said 800 folks coming from around the world. So there are
Yeah.
plenty of people to help. We don't have to worry about folks running out of running out of families to care for.
No,
Um,
I wish.
So I don't know
Yeah,
if that helps, but go ahead, Beth.
sure. So I was gonna say, Julie, that's as far as we are concerned, there is the financial component of it. So maybe it does, maybe it would need to wait, but that's up to you guys. Let's see, said differently. Okay. So in let's say you are successful in receiving a grant, because maybe it's easier to do it that way, in January, then after that, because you can go ahead and and have your background checks done, you can go ahead and have a welcome team. If you know that you want to engage with refugees, even if you don't get a grant, there will be plenty to do. Like another church might need help with their welcome team, or something like that. So when you receive a grant, then you can let our co-sponsorship person know that you're ready to become co-sponsors, and then they will begin looking for families that are coming. It depends on where your church is located and where you are willing to drive. I know Sarah said they drive down from Fenton. That's unusual. Like, that's really cool, but also not every church is willing to drive that far. So like if you have a half hour, that's your limit. That's what we'll look for. And housing in your area that is affordable, and that there is a family of a family of 4, a family of 5. We would probably give a family of, unless you're Julie, a family of like 8, to a larger congregation, like someone with, a few more people, because that's a lot more work. So it's an art, not a science. If that is helpful, that's what I have learned from our case managers, is that it depends on, geographic area. It depends on the size of the family, and what the congregation is kind of wanting to take on. And yeah, we'll definitely be, we were already receiving people from Afghanistan before the crisis. I don't think that they're going to stop coming, from what we've heard. But we also have families from Syria, Iraq, Myanmar, the Congo, who are also really in need of co-sponsors. So as you say, yes, we're ready, and we wouldn't say, like, just for example, I was talking to a congregation in Romeo. And they were interested in co-sponsorship, and we were like, that is very far. Even though they were financially able, they were ready, all that stuff, that would not be fair to a family, to have them be that far out from community. Occasionally, like, we might have a family that would want to be somewhere far out. The family has agency in deciding where they want to go as well, which is why it's an art, not a science. But that would be a reason. If that is helpful, that's a big reason for placing people where we do. And if they said we'd be willing to drive up to an hour, to co-sponsor a family, like, probably not advisable, but also, like, that's a different factor. Okay.
Maybe we can just take one or two more questions, and there's a lot, and Beth is offering, there's going to be more trainings where people might ask different questions and you might hear different things. On Monday or Tuesday, there's going to be an email sent out from the Presbytery office that's focused on the Faith in Action grants. And again, those three different parts, which Lynn asked about earlier, the three different tracks that I mentioned. I mentioned this in the Presbytery meeting, but if you weren't there, that might have been news for you. So I'm sorry about that. The three different tracks are the first track is the refugee resettlement. And this is the 10 $5,000 grants that we're offering. The second track is there's 10 $2,000 grants available for what I call pastor discretionary fund, for congregations and pastors to have funds to help people directly. For example, we have people who come to our church office who might need a gas card or help with an electric bill or things like that. So there's going to be, in track 2, there is funds available, especially for pastors in maybe areas of high need, or if there are pastors who don't have that kind of funding available. The third track available is for the bigger, there's $180,000 left out of all that. And so bigger grants that are focused around Matthew 25 and the vision of Matthew 25 as the Peace USA Matthew 25 vision that I'm guessing most of your churches have talked about, at least. I think so. Yes, I'm looking at all your churches. Yes. So those are the three different tracks, and information and the applications for all three of those tracks. You can apply to all three of those tracks, your church can, and that will be in the email that's hopefully coming out Monday or Tuesday. I will also have a link to that, the document that Beth talked about earlier on co-sponsorship. And maybe Beth, you can send me the links to the other Zoom times that are coming as well. And Sarah, if you have other resources, I can link to those too. So I see that Joelle had a question about anticipated costs for monthly rent. I'm guessing that depends on the area in which they're placed. Yes.
Yeah, it depends. And that's something that we have been looking for, are places that will offer reduced rent. That was something that we were able to do when we teamed up with Habitat. We were able to offer either like zero rent up to, maybe $1,000 a month, just really subsidized, but not all places can do that. So that it all depends. There are places that offer reduced rent, but there aren't always places that want to rent to refugees because they have no credit. They have no credit history. They have, they may not have employment yet, which is why we're looking for, temporary housing for people that, and we have had some success with this, people who have rental properties and are willing to rent to refugees. So that's really the factor. It's really hard to say a cost for monthly across the board, but you can look up rents in your area, and affordable housing is really hard to find, which is why one of the big things we asked for is rental assistance, because it's kind of ridiculous right now. So ideally, yes, we would love to find those places. If you know of those places, let me know and I can pass it on to our housing person. But generally, we want our families to be, in a safe, good place. And that might require some assistance at the beginning. So hope that is somewhat helpful.
Thanks. I want to thank Beth and Sarah for being with us tonight, and the other members of our team, Emma and Michael, who are here. Thank you guys. And again, look for the announcements about that in the Presbytery email. If you don't get that, I think you can probably go to the website to sign up for it. Or you can contact us at, Michael, what's our email address? Faith in Action, is that it?
At DetroitPresbytery.org.
Faith in Action at Detroit Presbytery. I'm trying to write it. .org. I think I got it. That's our email address. Yeah, but the information should be out soon. So thank you all for coming tonight. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.